Hi, this is Tim. Welcome to Tim Can Cook. So today we're going to make pie crust. Now we're making a pie crust because we're really going to make chicken pot pie. When the chicken pot pie video is ready, it'll be up there in the corner. But I wanted to debunk something here, and that is the whole concept that pie crusts are hard to make. They're really very simple. This recipe is an all butter recipe. No shortening needed, nothing fancy. You could do it with a pastry cutter, or you can do it with a food processor. I'm going to use a food processor, as I think you know by now I like my toys. We're going to start by putting a cup and a half of flour into our food processor. To that, we're going to add a teaspoon of kosher salt. Now, all of my recipes use kosher salt. If you decide to use regular salt, cut the number in half. So we're just going to pulse this a couple of times to mix the dry ingredients together. And now we're going to add in 1 cup of butter. This is very cold. It's been cut into little 1/2-inch chunks. And I mean very cold. It's not frozen, but if you don't do this cold, then you're going to have problems. So this is one of the tricks, the magic, to making really good pastry crust. So we've got that in the processor. We're just going to pulse it now for, oh, I don't know, maybe 15-20 seconds. Now the idea here is to incorporate all of that butter and flour together. Now once you've done that, then we're going to add in the rest of the flour. So again, this is the remaining cup. And that's now a total of 2.5 cups of flour. And then we'll just combine these. Now what that first 1.5 cups with that butter did is it coated all of that flour with butter. And that should be enough. So now we'll dump our mix out into a bowl where we will add 4 tablespoons of ice cold water. And I do mean ice cold. Make sure you don't get the ice chunks in here. Now with this, we're just going to kind of push it around a little bit. We're not going to stir it together. We're just going to kind of push it around in the bowl and see if this is enough to form our pastry dough. It might not be, and that's okay. You can see it's not forming yet into a dough. The amount of water you use, like any flour-based recipe, is going to depend on the humidity, how much moisture was in your flour. By the way, that butter was unsalted. So I'm just putting a couple more tablespoons in here. So we're up to 7. Now it's starting to really form here. We don't want to work this. We're just combining the ingredients. If you work this into like a bread dough, you'll generate gluten. We don't want gluten. Gluten makes pastry dough tough. As you can see, we're getting very close to forming our dough. We can test this by forming it with our hands. If it falls apart, We need just a little bit more water. And I'm going to add 2 more, so we're up to 9 tablespoons of water. And this is going to be pretty close. Got a little bit down there on the bottom. Okay. So again, we're mixing basically by pushing it around. And we're getting very close here. I can tell by the feeling that we're really close. If you can see, I'm now able to form it into a dough. So that's as far as we want to go. Now, we're going to dump this out onto our silicon mat. And we're just going to push it together without kneading it. Remember, no kneading here. This is very important. We're not kneading this. And as we get this combined, now we're just going to cut it in half. We'll create 2 smaller discs. And then we're going to refrigerate these discs. Now, this is, again, going to be a pastry crust for chicken pot pie. If we were doing a crust for a sweet dessert, then we would just add a tablespoon of sugar to the dry ingredients that are in the blender. So I'm just going to wrap these now in saran wrap. They're going to go in the refrigerator for at least an hour. They can go overnight, and then we'll come back and roll it out. So in the meantime, I will be making the chicken pot pie, which will be in another video. And then we'll wrap this up by rolling out this pie crust, putting it on our pie and baking in the oven. So again, when the pie recipe is ready, it'll be linked up there. In the meantime, we will wrap these up and put them in the fridge. So here we have our pastry dough discs ready for the refrigerator for at least an hour. That will allow the moisture in the butter to fully penetrate the flour. It'll be ready to go, ready to be rolled out when we come back. So we'll see you in just about an hour with our chicken pot pie ready to be covered with this beautiful pastry. We'll be right back. All right, so our pastry dough has sat in the refrigerator for about an hour and a half, and it is in great shape. Now you remember earlier I did say if you didn't have a food processor, you can use a pastry cutter. You make this with a pastry cutter very easily. I just like using the toys. So now we're going to roll this out so that it fits on our pie. Now we don't want it to stick. Even though we've got this silicon mat, it's important for this operation that it doesn't stick. So we're going to put a little flour down, and we're going to flour our roller. And we're going to flour the top of our dough here a little bit. Now this little bit of flour isn't going to affect this any. Now, rather than just begin to roll it immediately, we're going to pound it first. This is just a little trick to get it down to the thickness where we can comfortably roll it. If it should start to break apart on the edges, just push the edges back in. We want to get this into a reasonably round shape. Now we'll roll this out. We want it about 1/8 of an inch thick. And just rolling it gently. Again, if the edges crack too badly, we can push them back in. One of the things I like about this silicon mat is it does have marks on it. right, for the size of our circle here. And I know I want to be out around 11 inches for our 10-inch pan. And it's okay if there's some flaws. You know, this is all about rustic home cooking. This is not our restaurant meal. So we're getting pretty close here. I know this lid is about the same size as my pan. You can actually feel where the dough might be a little thick. And again, if the edges break, you just push them back together. And I think we're getting pretty close here. And if we've done our magic correctly, we'll be able to pick this up onto the ruler, and it won't stick to our counter. It won't stick much. Could use a little more flour down there, I guess. And this just lets us transfer it over to the pie, and it's a little sticky without breaking too badly. Could have done a better job there with flour on the board. Okay, now so you can see it here on camera, we'll go ahead and move this back over to the middle. There we go. So now we'll just roll it back onto our chicken pot pie. Now if we were doing this into a pan for making a pie tin, then the same process would apply. So now all we're going to do here is we're just going to pinch this. I'm not even going to trim it, because you see we came very close to the size of our pan here. There's not enough extra crust, pie crust here, to make any difference. So all we're doing is we're just pinching it over here a little bit on the edge. You could do a fancy scalloped edge if you had more crust, but we don't. So it's actually the perfect amount. The second half of our crust is still in the refrigerator, and it can actually go into the freezer if you'd like. Now all we're going to do here is we're going to poke a few holes in it so that it vents while we're cooking. Otherwise it will explode, and we certainly don't want that. We'll go into a 375-degree oven on top of a baking tray, so that if there is any spillover, it's not on the floor of the oven and I don't get in trouble for making the oven any more dirty than I normally do. So it'll go in that 375-degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. I will cover it for the first 10 minutes with a tint of aluminum foil, just to keep this from browning too much. It's not a required step, but I like to do that. So we'll see you back here in about 30 minutes with our finished pie. So that's really it for our pie crust video. Pie crusts are very simple to make. Now we will make a couple of sweet crusts later on when we make some dessert pies. But if you've enjoyed this, and I hope again that it has taken away some of the mystery of how to make an all butter pie crust. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, share it with a friend, help me grow the channel. and I will see you again next time on Tim Can Cook.